Hi, welcome. My name is Bertus Pelser. I'm a composer and sound designer, primarily working on film, short film, art, and dance projects. I also do a lot of commercial work at AMP Amsterdam, where I'm the head of studios. We have 5 studios in Amsterdam, and today we are in one of them. One aspect I particularly enjoy is working on projects where I can do both music composition and sound design, and then blend them together into one sonic piece. So basically using sound design in a musical way and incorporating musical elements into the sound design. The project we are going to explore today is an animated film for Playgrounds Inmotion, which is an art festival that celebrates the craft of animation and CG. The animation is directed and animated by Erwin van den IJssel. Together we worked on a new identity of the festival, and this film is the main title film of the festival. So let's take a look at the briefing and how we cooked up the main idea. Erwin and I sat down, had a coffee, and he filled me in on the movie's concept. He envisioned an animated film where real-life objects morph into animated waveforms, blurring the line between the physical and the digital worlds. Each scene in the film is like its own little universe. So Erwin showed me a lot of concept art at the beginning. We brainstormed different ways to interpret the waveform and translate it from the visual perspective to the audio perspective. After thinking about different concepts, I took a step back and then formulated a sort of general definition of what I wanted to achieve. So I came up with the following sentence. I want to underline the fact that each world stands on its own, whilst maintaining a natural build-up in order to have the feeling that we're taken on a journey through different worlds. Also, the piece has a clear breakdown moment on the zotrope, which propels the story to another level. Next steps involve planning the cues based on Erwin's locked animation. Sure, we talked a lot about inspiration, musical directions, specific elements in certain tracks, but also similarities between different aspects of art and craft. But I then just tend to absorb all that input and use it as something in the back of my mind during the creative process. Something I can fall back to when needed. At first, I thought it might be a good move to provide Erwin with a click track or a simple initial music sketch to sync his cues and animations on. But after thinking it over, we both realized it could also backfire because of the creative freedom he needed to craft a dynamic animation with varying speeds and smooth transitions between cues. So that's why we decided that the flow, tempo and scene changes in his animation would take the lead, and I would time the composition accordingly. So let's dive into logic. So here we are looking at the final results of the cue layout. At the start of every scene I've put a marker with a clear description of what it is about. Here you can see the signatures of the meter changes. And this is the tempo track, of course. Quite some heavy tempo jumps. So let's have a look at the scene changes with the click track. So making sure every scene lands roughly on the first beat of the next bar. So of course you can't determine all this without having any notion about what kind of harmonies you will use, what your melodic material is. But it's more like a back and forth kind of situation. So the musical sketching goes hand in hand with timing your cues to picture. So on to the next step, coming up with initial musical ideas. I don't have a set method for starting a piece of music. Sometimes it's all about the rhythm, other times it's diving into the harmony. Sometimes it's just a melody that pops into existence. But for this project, I knew I wanted to start with harmony. Because with so many different worlds in the film, I figured nailing the harmonic outline was key to setting each one apart and capturing its unique feel. So I'm a pianist, so naturally I start behind the keys to translate a scene into piano playing, find chord progressions, motives, cells, etc. And after playing around for a bit, I take a step back and get into the more compositional process. I scribble down chord progressions, write down melodies, and notate ideas and emotions I have based on the chord progressions. So I wrote a roving kind of harmony that's not establishing a clear tonal center. with some chord connections from distant tonalities. And I found out that major seventh chords with extensions not only set the immersive tone of the composition, but also work to smooth out the chord progression with those more far-off tonalities. So I also created some melodic cells to complement the chord progression and the melodic material. As for the melody, there's a 4-note motive that serves two main functions. First, it contrasts with the lush chord progression, so adding an element of instability that suits the oddity of the waltz. So that's one, and then So let's take a look at some scenes where music and sound design are working together to create one sonic piece. The first scene I want to show you is the train scene. When I first saw this scene, I knew I wanted to incorporate the sounds of the train tracks and the engine into the rhythm of the music. So I created an 8-note pattern out of those sounds. Another element is the train horn or whistle that I pitched to the note A, which is the 9th of the G major 13 chord playing under the scene. I also wanted the train to be audible in the intro shot, pulling the viewer into this first scene. And there's also a subtle variation in the melody that adds an octave for some interest. So let's listen to the sound design only. From here it might be nice to add some musical elements to see how they fit with the sound design. The first part to add are the melodic cells in the piano, harp, mandolin and celeste. So yeah, this creates a nice interlocking kind of feel, where the rhythm of the cells resemble a train movement, and the sound design is pitched in the tonalities of the cells, so they're really sort of blended together. So next up is the climbing gear scene, where I want to show one possibility to treat a musical element from a more sound design perspective, taking into account the movements in the animation. I want to focus on a specific treatment of an arpeggiated synth chord made in Diva. I used a lot of different parameters to follow the movements of the climbing gear. Of course, there's volume, panning and reverb, but there's also parameters that are automated within Diva. I've been using the multiplier function in Diva a lot recently. That's this function here. Basically what it does is slow down or speed up the tempo of the arpeggiator module by multiplying based on the set note length. In the automation lane you can see that I did a little ramp up, and then we go down to the end of the scene, basically following the movements of the climbing gear. To make it a bit more obvious, and to get this stretched kind of quality, a push and pull. Another function I use a lot in Diva is the restart function. You can set the value here for the sequence length, so where the arpeggiator restarts its sequence. Automating the restart function can create interesting, evolving patterns. So for example, if you have a piece of music in 6/8 and you set the reset value at 7 or at 4, you get an interesting contrast, a sort of melodic syncopation. So now let's take a look at the water slide scene. At this point in the film, we've seen a lot of sort of magical, otherworldly scenes. And I wanted to create a break in style, so have a more humoristic quality. And I wanted to enhance the character aspects of this water slide, so making it a weird, sluggish, slow living thing. So let's dive into the sound design. There's a lot of different layers. There's like more air valves, pumping sounds. Almost like a creature breath. Metallic lever kind of sounds. Cool. Of course, also a lot of plastic sounds and some other metal layers. So music-wise, we are in B flat in our chord progression. No extensions this time, but with a 1-5 pattern in the bass, underlining the humoristic kind of feel. Also added in a lot of synthesizers, also to enhance that 1-5 pattern in the bass. And this is how it works with the rest of the music. So last but not least, I always export everything into Pro Tools in order to mix and master the project. I prefer not being able to endlessly tweak MIDI in Logic. At this stage, I still do a lot of tweaks, adding elements or muting layers. But it's also nicer to work in audio, doing final mixes with directors and clients. So before we wrap up and have a final look at the video, let's quickly dive into the zotrope. The concept of a zotrope is really cool because it's at 3/4 of the movie, creating a moment of rest, and then it propels you to another level. Because of this, and the fact that it's a film for a festival, I wanted to use the zotrope as a breakdown, build-up, and drop EDM-like structure, and from there switch to a different genre. So for the zotrope, I created a sort of riser, a build-up towards the drop, with some sound design layers. So for example, here's the ambience and some friction sounds. Adding mechanical layers, thick kind of sounds, but also musical elements like a snare drum. And here I created some synthesizers rising in pitch. Last but not least, the skateboard character. So after this build-up, the rest of the piece switches to a more dubstep kind of feel, where the sound design sits between the kick and the snare pattern, and it has a more energetic feel, which fits well with the fact that it's also a festival film. And this is the final result. What I really liked about this project is that having total freedom and room for interpretation as a composer and sound designer at the start of a project is just really effective. And working with a director that understands this is great. In the end, it's all about trust and mutual understanding and understanding of each other's work.